Hey guys, Cade Wilcox here, host of the Primitive Podcast. Thanks for listening to this week's episode with Kendra Burris. Kendra is the Deputy Chancellor of Texas Tech. Enjoyed having her on the podcast and listening to her insights about leadership and her work background.
At the Health Science Center, I did have a very tight-knit team, so you get very invested. You know their kids, you know what troubles they're having when their husband passes and when they have grandbabies. And so when you have to have hard conversations when their performance isn't there. I remember having this thought process when I was working out one morning of, okay, so do I start putting up a wall? Am I not being professional? Do I know too much about them? Am I too invested with them as people that when it's this hard to have uncomfortable conversations, what am I doing wrong? What can I do to change this? And I finally decided, you know what? That's who I am. I'm still going to their kids' weddings. I'm still going to go up to the hospital when they have babies. I'm still going to be there in their personal life because that's who I am as a person, and just lean into how that makes the uncomfortable part of it when you have to have those conversations.
Kendra, thanks so much for joining the Primitive Podcast. Really appreciate you being on. So for those who don't know who Kendra Burris is, tell us about your background and the work you do now and all that good stuff.
Thanks for having me, Cade. I'm very excited to be here. I grew up locally. I'm from Idalou and the Wildcats. Grew up on the farm there, have a pretty large family, and then I went to Tech, ag economics major. So kind of thought I'd always be in the agricultural world, and I guess you always are. Anything you do around here, you're going to be agricultural based, but kind of who I am, and that's my backbone. So been married 23 years to my husband, Scott, and 2 girls, both in college right now, so we're empty nesting, a senior at the University of Arkansas and a freshman at the University of Arkansas.
So
they did not stay and go to Tech.
They did not stay locally.
They wanted to
Did
get
Scott
away.
Go to Tech as well?
Yes, Scott went to Tech. I mean, everybody in my family's gone to Tech.
Yeah.
So, and we love it, and obviously it's who we are.
Right.
And we bleed red and black, but it might have been a little different because my husband's a professor at Tech. My mom works at Tech. I have a good role at Tech, and so the fact that we can call professors and check grades and
I gotta get out of here.
No. They have come to realize though when you're in trouble, it's nice to have your mom.
That's true.
Right. So
that's great. Has it been hard being an empty nester?
it was really hard your first child to leave, and then you realize how each stage of your kids' lives, it's so cool. Like baby, toddler, junior high, high school, the hard parts, but and the college years are so fun because that's when you're meeting your lifelong friends and experiencing all this new stuff. So to watch my older daughter go through that and share that with her, it makes it a lot easier for your second one to go away. Yeah. And it was hard. It's quiet when they first leave, but after a couple of weeks, it's real great.
Yeah, that's great. That's good to hear.
When she came home for Christmas, I was like, okay, when do we go back?
We have a 10 and 8-year-old, and like Lacey and I, my wife, we're always talking like Lacey's convinced, if they go to college, I'm like, skip college, start a business, grow your wealth, skip the whole college thing. But Lacey's like, wherever they go to college, I'm going to have an apartment and I'm going to be in their hair all the time. And I'm like, nope, we're not. We're going to travel the country and let them go grow up.
Yep. It's fun. It's an awesome time to watch them.
So how long have you been at Tech, and have you always been at
Yeah, so when my husband and I moved to Missouri for him to get his PhD and got a job on faculty back here, and I started actually at Covenant Health System at their foundation, and worked there for a few years, and then I moved to Tech, and I've been at Tech I think like 12 years now. Started as a development officer in fundraising, and moved over to the Health Science Center and did fundraising there for school medicine and kind of worked my way up. Eventually at the Health Science Center, ran the fundraising for all of our campuses. We have 5 campuses across the whole half of the state. And then eventually vice president of external relations, so communications, marketing, governmental relations, alumni fundraising, and that operation. And then now I'm in the chancellor's office at the system level. So.
Okay. So what is your role now?
So that's such a good question.
Yeah.
So my title's Deputy Chancellor, and it's up to anyone else to define what that is. Yeah. Basically, it's really just to make sure that what as the Chancellor, Dr. Mitchell, what his vision is and how he wants things to run, just to make sure that all of that happens and happens in the manner in which he would want it to do. So I'm so lucky and blessed every day.
Yeah.
It's a great job.
He was on our podcast some months ago, and it was awesome.
Yeah,
I was like, it could have been a 2-hour episode if it were up to me. It was really fun, just so down to earth, but what a great leader.
Easy to talk to and such a great leader. So I have many of those in my life, but he's definitely one
that's cool
to learn from, and we're really different, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And I think part of Daily Fuller's also in our office, and we all are very different.
That's cool.
But complement in the work environment.
That's great. So my question for you about leadership, you can answer it however you want.
Okay.
So you can answer it like how you see your role as a leader. But I would love to hear. So I want to hear you talk about your role as a leader. But I also want to hear, if you don't mind, kind of what you've learned being around so many great leaders that you've raised money from, leaders like Chancellor Mitchell, Board of Regents, like all these. You're surrounded by great leaders, and so I'd love just kind of hear
Almost
what you
like
think leadership is.
Too hard to take in,
Yeah.
because I get to experience so many amazing leaders, and honestly, some that aren't that great. Not currently,
Sure.
but in my, so learning from both, that's, I wanted to learn how to do that, or I want to not do that. That's not how I want to be perceived. So I think personally, how I see my personal leadership is, A, if you're not working on it every day, then you're not a leader. B, it changes. I think your leadership and how you lead can change from meeting to meeting of what role you're in, and you have to know to be flexible and adjust. Some meetings I'm there, to make sure something gets done, and it may not be what people like to hear or want to hear.
Right.
Where in the very next meeting, it's just to listen and just to be supportive. So currently, the system, the Texas Tech system has 4 universities with, obviously, our undergrad, Texas Tech, the Health Science Center. We have Health Science Center in El Paso, and then Angelo State, St. Angelo. And I'm sure Dr. Mitchell covered this on his podcast, so I don't want to rehash all of that. But, we are not a system, and we are not there if our students aren't being successful, and we don't get our students in and our faculty. So he's really been the servant leadership mode, and we've been working with that a lot at work on the difference of a servant leadership mentality when we're talking about our universities and our students and our faculty. And so that's personally what I'm working on right now every day. So
equipping others to be successful. I mean, it's like y'all's role is to equip the students, the faculty, the department chairs, the people at each of those institutions. It makes a lot of sense. You mentioned, observing bad leadership throughout the years as well. What are a few things that stick out to you that you just kind of remember going, that's not good for people, or that's not the way it should be done, or like, do you have anything that sticks out in your mind?
Well, I think it's hard in the fact I think I've come to a job or a situation where things don't usually get to me unless it's a problem and can't be solved. And so making those decisions. So, in fact, last week I went into Dr. Mitchell's office and I said, I don't feel like I'm solving problems. I like to, someone bring something, I fix it, I go to him, it's like, okay, X, Y, and Z happened, and this is what I did, this is what is the future, and I feel like I'm coming to you with more problems not being solved. And but that's kind of the nature of where we are right now, is there's hard problems, and I want to be kind and I want to treat people with respect, but in a lot of situations, I'm there to give news or to have conversations that aren't comfortable, So it's a really difficult balance. And so I've watched, Chairman Huckabee, Chris Huckabee is our last board chairman that just rotated off as board chairman, and actually rotating off as a board of regent as soon as the governor reappoints regents. But man, he's good at those. He's really good at having those conversations. and being clear and sincere and quick. And it's like you get yourself worked up, and then it's really actually not that big of a deal. So,
So this is interesting perspective. So I can imagine an organization that's the size of a Texas Tech system, it's working with and in government. So that is a whole different level and flavor of challenge maybe. So do you find it difficult, and you mentioned your desire to solve problems, do you find it difficult to balance kind of the human side of leadership with just like getting things done and the effectiveness side of leadership?
Very much so.
Yeah. And how have you tried to grow in that and wrestle with it and balance the human and the practical, if you will?
So we do a lot of leadership growth. I do it personally, and then Dr. Mitchell also does that as a leader of our office. And so two things. I think that probably we listen to a lot. We've been on Patrick Lencioni a lot lately.
That's good.
But probably the most influential as far as tangible things I've put in practice in my leadership and in my work role is a lot from what Brene Brown did on Dare to Lead. I think I had so many aha moments listening and reading that book when it comes to when she talks about to not have an uncomfortable conversation because you're uncomfortable is the definition of privilege. Like, you being uncomfortable is not part of this decision or this conversation. Why are we even considering it? And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, that's such an entitled thought process that I'm going to change something just because of me being uncomfortable. So there's a lot of that I try to balance. Years ago, I don't know, it's probably been 5 years ago maybe, I had my own kind of aha moment of I was having I get very invested in my people. And so at the Health Science Center, which was kind of different here, I had at the system, it's a much larger group, don't have really any direct reports, but kind of everybody. I'm trying to make sure everybody's doing well. At the Health Science Center, I did have a very tight-knit group team. And so you get very invested. Their kids, what troubles they're having when their husband passes and when they have grandbabies. And so then you have to have hard conversations when their performance isn't there. And I remember having this thought process when I was working out one morning of, okay, so do I start putting up a wall? Do you start, am I not being professional? Do I know too much about them? Am I too invested with them as people that when it's this hard to have uncomfortable conversations, then what am I doing wrong? What can I do to change this? And I finally decided, you know what? That's who I am. So I'm going to still have people over to stay at my house when they're in town visiting, and they are employees.
Sure.
I'm still going to their kids' weddings. I'm still going to go up to the hospital when they have babies. I'm still going to be there in their personal life because that's who I am as a person, and just lean into how that makes the uncomfortable part of it when you have to have those conversations.
Yeah, that's good. One of my favorite things Brene Brown's ever said is clear as kind. So our chief of staff, Annie, here, it's like clear as kind, clear as kind. And we've been really influenced by
she
her
changed
stuff too.
that. Yeah, so that's what's so interesting about her book, because even all Lencioni's books, even all these other books you read, you get philosophically what they're doing. That book, more than any that I've read, we actually put into place practices from it on a daily basis. She changes how we talk in meetings and staff meetings, like ready to rumble and, clear as kind. And I don't know, it was fascinating. We had 2 people from her team actually come out and do a whole workshop with us.
Cool.
So that's kind of, anyway.
It's been good. Yeah, really powerful. How do you treat failure? When y'all are working as a team and as an organization, and something doesn't go the way it needs to or supposed to, what's your approach to failure?
I hate it, and I'm not good at it.
I could gather that is probably very true.
So, failure's not something that I do well with. I think acknowledging that you don't know why it's happening right now, but you will in 3 to 6 months. If you look back in all of what I consider major failures or things didn't happen the way I thought they should happen, usually within 6 months, you're like, Oh, that's why. Okay, this is why this didn't work the way it was supposed to. I have had to work on myself far as, when you get something in your mind, this is how it's going to work, this is what it's going to do, to be flexible, and maybe winning, as I would say, just looks different. And I think that I've gotten better at that. I have been able to be a little more flexible and a little more nimble when it comes to my thought process and defining what I think success looks like, maybe a little different in the end.
Not being flexible at an organization of y'all size
I know.
probably creates a lot of challenges for you, doesn't it?
I know.
Have you ever done Clifton Strength Finders or anything like that?
So we just did. I've done a lot of them, and I don't remember everything that I am on the colors or the strengths or Myers-Briggs.
They're all so different.
Yeah, so we just did. Actually, Patrick Lencioni came out most recently with 6 Working Geniuses.
Yeah.
So our whole team, vice chancellors, the presidents are doing it with Dr. Mitchell next week. And tenacity and galvanizing are my 2 strengths.
We're really big on Clifton Strength Finders, and I would almost bet $100 that you have competition in your top 5.
You probably so.
That's good. How do you approach your own personal growth? You're responsible for supporting and equipping a lot of others, serving all your department chairs and all the people in your organization. So how do you intentionally focus on your growth so that you're capable and prepared to support your team?
Right. I do think much like being a mom, a wife, a leader, anything, if you're not working on yourself on a daily basis, then you can't do that and provide for others. So, I'm a huge podcast person, much like you. I know you run and work out. I can't believe you ran this morning. I like to run when it's cold. This morning was a little too much, Kate.
I tell you what, I got back and I told Lacey, I feel like I'm freezer burned.
I can imagine. I've ran in the snow. I've ran, the last time it was really cold, we went out to May Simmons and ran on the trails, and it was beautiful. But this morning...
It was chilly.
Yeah.
And I was layered up, and my 8-year-old, I got in, and my beard was, completely, frozen, and he was pretty enamored with that. So,
but working out for me and moving is a key. Sherry, who was my assistant in the Health Science Center, kind of like my right-hand person, she used to tell me when I walked in if I had worked out. She said, it's crazy. She's like, your demeanor when you walk in, your body language, how you walk, is completely different on the days you work out and the days you don't. And I thought that was such an interesting perspective from her part. So I do try very hard in the mornings to get up and move and to work out. It clears my head and it helps me think and be the best that I can be. Right now, I'm into listening to Eric Thomas. I don't know if you've listened to Eric Thomas.
Not yet.
He's awesome. He's pretty intense, but he's really great. So,
and is that a podcast?
It's a podcast, and he also his podcasts are kind of long. So he also has short clips on Spotify, a radio station. And so I kind of put his clips in my workout playlist. But he really calls you out. He works a lot with athletic teams. But what I've been listening to probably the last month, I get on kicks, and then once I feel like I'm off of it, then I move on. So the last month, it's what you are to be, you are becoming now. And so he talks about everything you do today is what you're going to be in 10 years, what you're going to be in 5 years. And so no opportunity wasted. So every day, what you're doing is what you're becoming. And so he talks about drawing this line. And so this is now all in my mirror. So my bathroom mirror is usually covered up with stuff because I'm like, oh, that's good. I got to be able to see this every morning before I go to work. So I have a big line down my mirror on my bathroom wall. And every decision or habit that's bad for that day, you write below the line. And every decision or habit or person, he even talks about the people in your life. So that encouraged you or pushed you to be better, then you write above the line. And so he talks about over time, you need to have less things below the line than you have above the line.
That's really cool.
And so, so Eric Thomas is really part of my morning playlist for my personal growth and really pushing me. He also, which been thinking a lot about lately too. He talks about how you take on every day. He said, so you get up and you're ready to take on every day, and you're just like this machine gun. You're just going to fire away. And he talks about, and he has gun related, but he's like, do you have a scope on your gun? Like, are you intentional in your day, and how are you doing this? And so I've been really trying to think through that in my day and how I'm growing every day and becoming a better person. So that's been interesting. So, and then there's another podcast I listen to. I think it's called like Badass Motivational Speaking, and it's like your top speakers, and so it's a lot of different people.
Cool.
And one of the ones I listened to last week that I'm still thinking about and processing is motivation is the byproduct of action, not the cause of action. Which was kind of an aha moment for me, because, and you think about it, it's true. I'm not motivated in the morning to get up, but after I get up and work out, then I'm motivated.
Right.
And so it just was I don't know, it was a light bulb for me on action is what motivates you. So if you're waiting around to be motivated to have action, you're missing the boat. If you get up and you do something, you will be motivated to do more.
Right. That's really good.
Yeah,
I've never heard it put that way, but it makes a ton of sense. I would rather not run more often than I would run.
Right.
That I want to run, right? But by running, you end up running more. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Well, and you never get up and work out and think, man, I shouldn't have done that.
Right.
Right? Like, why is it still hard to get up every morning? Like every morning I'm like, God, why do I got to, this morning I did not want to get up. But then you get up and you're not.
Right.
You're never like, oh, that was a bad choice.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's these daily habits, these daily disciplines, these daily deposits actually are the thing that end up actually propelling you forward and creating success.
Right. And routine is, your strength is your routine.
Yeah. Have you read Atomic Habits yet? So it's something you'd probably really enjoy listening to.
Okay.
It's a great audiobook, but it talks about a lot of these things you're sharing, and it's really powerful in terms of just how to create habits. And it's nothing like most of us think in terms of creating habits.
Right.
And so I think you would really, really enjoy that.
Well, and it's, I pick these and I have them in my playlist and listen over and over, because I think if you just listen once and you don't listen over, like I need it over and over. I need to remind myself and continue to challenge myself on those thought processes.
That's good.
So, and then the other one that I'm listening to, it's called Abraham Thinking. I have no idea who it is or where it's coming from, but it's the weird voices. But they talk about this law of attraction. So what you are thinking, you then speak and then you act. And so it talks so much about your thoughts, and kind of like birds of a feather flock together. But this whole, it's so much of what you think is what you put out, and are you controlled in what your thoughts are? So anyway, that's kind of where I am right now in my personal growth.
That's good.
You can come look at my bathroom mirror and you can figure out everything, everywhere I'm struggling, that I'm trying to be better, is pretty much on my bathroom mirror.
When you said that, I thought, man, I'd run out of bathroom mirror on the bottom, if I listed every single mistake I make in a day. So I probably shouldn't start that practice. You've worked with Dr. Mitchell for a long time, right? Because he was at the Health Science Center, you were with him there, and then you moved to the Chancellor office. What would you, and I was saying earlier how much I enjoyed having him on our podcast. What would you say are a couple of distinguishing marks of his leadership that you believe make him so effective?
Wow, he connects.
Just relationally with people?
He can totally sits down with anyone at any time and listens and is engaged and really cares about people. He's obviously, if I'm choosing to spend my career, working for someone, I don't want him to be an asshole. So I like working for Dr. Mitchell. So he's just he's a well-spoken, he's well-read, but then he's just so humble and kind. And he does not like to be bragged on, so he probably
won't be listening to this podcast anymore.
Yeah,
so
telling me he can't listen. But very early in working for him, when I knew, hey, this is a leader, this is someone that I want to work for, was when you travel, the way he treats the wait staff at the restaurants, I can't even tell you how many people walk away and then they see like his tip or the note that he's left and they come back and so nice and give him a hug. I am not that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I do tip well, but
Sure.
I'm usually like onto something, putting my, writing down my notes.
On to the next thing.
On to the next thing. And he does make every person, so I think it's very, I think it's an admirable qualities.
Yeah. Seems to be really fitting for a role he has. Again, just so many stakeholders, alumni, government officials, students, professors, all different backgrounds, it's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. And, that's what, it's so cool. And if I sit back and think where I am and what I get to experience with it, because you have Dr. Mitchell, who obviously is awesome, but then you have Dr. Scuvenak, who in himself, completely different leader, but is, God, he's so cool and so great. And then you have Dr. Ross Spearman, our first female president in the Texas Tech system, and her leadership skills are like so fine-tuned and honed in, also completely different than the other two guys. And then we've just hired a Lieutenant General of the Air Force, retired, General Hawkins at ASU, first African-American president for ASU. Oh. So it's just like, I just can't learn enough from these people. Yeah, I just can't take it in fast enough because they're all so unique separately in their leadership, which is a cool thing to witness because they're all amazing leaders and they're all really, really different. So there's not a cookie cutter way to be a leader.
I'd like to volunteer to be your assistant for a week.
You should.
Unpaid,
and we
no
have
paid.
so much fun. And that, that's what's so awesome about them is that, it's a very big job. All of them have huge jobs. Our system, across the system, it's a $2.2 billion company or business. We have 57,000 students across the system, 19,000 employees. So it's such a huge thing. But then they always also have so much fun. Like there's not one single meeting, maybe some if it's real intense, especially with the pandemic. But I would say 80% of the time that we don't laugh and we don't have a really, really good time.
Cool.
And then you throw Kirby in there as the athletic director, and what a crazy cool leader he is. Leader. I mean, his ability, and this is what I've learned from Kirby, his ability, the stuff he deals with is and personalities and people, and it's just a lot. His ability to listen and to stay calm and not get worked up, but then when he talks, he's very clear in what he says. That's one thing that I've in my, I'm like, okay, that's what Kirby does well that I want to do.
Yeah,
and then
good.
Scuvenak is so sincere. He reads every freaking email people send him, and he tries to respond. And some of them shouldn't be responding. And so, and he wants to respond to everyone, and his sincerity and his true just wanting to do the right thing is so impressive. And then you go to Dr. Ross Spearman, her ability to make hard decisions and follow through with them and be clear in what those decisions are it's just like I'm living a leadership podcast every day.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's why I want to become your assistant.
You can.
So I could just absorb it all.
And we have a blast.
That's awesome. This has been really good. My last question for you is probably my favorite, which is if you could go back 20, 30 years, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self?
To read more.
Read more?
Mm-hmm. I did not read enough, still do not read enough. It is an area that I've got to challenge. Knowledge is power, and I'm not talking about what you learn in a classroom or in a textbook, but I'm always, like for instance, we were in a meeting the other day, and Dr. Scuvenak said he had just finished reading Team of Rivals and everything he learned from it. I was like, okay, that's great. I'm gonna put this on my list. I Amazoned it, and I texted him a picture of it. I'm like, good grief, this is gonna take me 2 years to read this freaking book, and he probably read it in a weekend. But I do like watching Dr. Scuvenak and watching Dr. Mitchell and listening to their conversations. So much of what they reflect on and how they think comes from books. It's something that I fall very short on. So that's what I'm working on right now. I'd much rather listen to a book, but I make myself at least have 2 books going at one time.
Yeah, so. My wife is a reader. I think in 2020 she read like 137 books.
I probably haven't done that in my life.
I know, me too. That's what I'm saying. It's like if I read 12, I listen to a lot of stuff. So like all my long runs are audiobooks. So I mean, if audiobooks count, I'm kind of in good place. But reading, there is something really powerful though about the tangible touching and feeling and underlining and thinking and going slower. And so I can resonate with that a lot. Well, thanks for all your time.
Oh, you're welcome.
Really
It's
generous
been fun.
of you. Yeah, I'm glad to have you. And thanks.
I didn't say anything too bad.
No.
Nothing too
I think
inappropriate.
this
You're not
going to
bleep me out.
Really simple podcast for Hunter to edit. So thanks for being on.
Okay, thank you.